Unit 16, Binge-drinking Britain. 1. What's going on in the picture? Why do you think this happens in Britain? Do some people in your country behave in the same way? Why not? Now 2. Read the text about binge drinking a lot of alcohol in a short period of time. What kind of text do you think it is? A. Tabloid newspaper article about today's young people. B. An academic study of the social problem of binge drinking in Britain. C. An editorial in a serious newspaper suggesting solutions to the problem. D. A report by an organisation opposed to restricting the sale of alcohol. Match the words in A and B to make collocations from the text. Then match them to the definitions AL. A1, lager. 2, aggressive. 3, road. Loose. 5, rapid. 6, licensed. 7, cultural. 8, disinhibited. 9, first rate. 10, male-dominated. 11, drunken vertical. B, boozer, premises, swill, drinking establishments, louts, boundaries, incentive, outbursts, ambivalence, rage, expansion, behaviour. Definitions: a tradition of mixed positive and negative feelings about something. B, angry behaviour towards other car drivers. C, very heavy drinking. D, fast-moving growth. E, youths who behave badly after drinking too much light beer. F, actions showing no self-control. G, bars where people stand up to drink. H, places where alcohol can legally be served. I, the very best form of encouragement. J, unclear and flexible definitions. K, sudden periods of violent behaviour. L, traditional simple bars where mostly men drink. Fourth, use the context to guess the meaning of these words in the text. 1. Epithets, L01. 2. Novel. 3. Coined, L6. 4. Ancestry. 5. Waywardness. 6. Legacy, L-framed. Famed, acute. 9. Impose. Convergence, volvemic consumption. 12. Heralding, L66. Are these statements true, T, false, F, or not stated, NS, in the text? 1. Binge drinking, like road rage, is a relatively new problem in Britain. 2. A sudden increase in the number of bars has caused binge drinking. 3. There has always been a higher incidence of drunken bad behaviour among men than women. 4. The problem of public drunkenness tends to be worse in countries with a history of disapproval of alcohol consumption. 5. The attitudes of anti-drinking movements still determine where and when alcohol can be bought. 6. It is only now that we realise that trying to stop people doing something makes them all the more keen to do it. 7. The licensing laws are the only reason why British people binge drink. 8. The worst drunkenness occurs in pubs that stay open after midnight. In some other European countries, the problem of binge drinking is now worse than in Britain. 10. The authorities believe that the drinking habits of southern Europe are now replacing the old binge drinking culture of Britain. What do you think? Which of the explanations given for binge drinking in Britain do you find convincing? Why? Do you agree this behaviour is more common in Northern Europe than in the South? Why? Why not? If it is true that it is starting to happen in countries other than Britain, why do you think this is? What do you think the solutions are? Object! Imagine you have been asked to take part in a government campaign against excessive drinking in Britain. Write a leaflet for distribution among young people there, including the following information: why binge drinking is harmful to the individual, why it can be dangerous to other people, why it isn't cool, other things that young people can do in the evening instead of drinking.
Page 34. Exercise 2.
Binge drinking. The term binge drinking has, in recent years, come to replace earlier epithets such as lagerlouts in discussions of alcohol-related antisocial behaviour. The use of such a new term is taken by many commentators to imply that the phenomenon to which it relates is also quite novel. But in the way that aggressive outbursts from motorists were common long before the descriptor road rage was coined, the patterns of behaviour that fall within the loose boundaries of binge drinking also have a long ancestry in Britain. One only has to read the Worktown Bolton Temperance Society annual report of 1854, which commented that drunkenness is painfully prevalent in the borough. 1,000 facts bear most painful testimony. Men and women staggering along the public streets, fights, and brawls of the most barbarous character. This description could well have referred to events in Nottingham, Watford, or Brighton last weekend. Binge drinking? Certainly. A result of the rapid expansion of licensed premises in town centres and a negative shift in alcohol-related behaviours as a consequence, or a newfound waywardness among young men and women in contemporary society? Hardly, given such historical precedents. While these patterns of behaviour are very characteristic of what we take to be British drinking styles, they are not unique to this country. They are found elsewhere in temperance cultures, predominantly Anglo-Saxon and Nordic countries, that have experienced the influence of strong temperance movements. Such traditions have generated what is commonly referred to in the academic literature as a cultural ambivalence towards alcohol, compared with the integrated approach that is characteristic of, say, Mediterranean countries and elsewhere that have not experienced to such a substantial degree the impact of religious and ideological anti-drinking forces. While these forces might be less evident today than they used to be, their legacy remains. Enshrined, for example, in the complexity of current licensing laws, negative expectations regarding the outcomes of drinking, and in the tendency towards disinhibited drinking behaviours. The idea that binge drinking is a product of our continuing ambivalence about alcohol is not new, nor restricted to academic researchers. The novelist Doris Langley Moore wrote in the News Chronicle of the 1st of June 1939, "Licensing regulations, like many other old-fashioned methods of dealing with potential evil, were framed under the simple illusion that you can prevent people from doing something they want to do by placing difficulties in their way. The most acute students of human nature have long been aware that, on the contrary, difficulty frequently acts as a first-rate incentive." The author goes on to argue that if people in Britain were treated in this context, like the Latins, Hungarians, Romanians, etc., we should adjust ourselves to the idea of being treated as rational creatures and would behave as such. It is, of course, too simple to say that binge drinking is entirely caused by the restrictions we impose on alcohol consumption, and particularly on the hours during which drinking can take place. It is the case that in most towns and cities, it is now possible to drink until 2 a.m. or later, although often at some considerable expense compared with pubs with normal closing times. On the other hand, the fact that the determination to drink relatively large quantities of alcohol in a relatively short time is evident only in societies which impose such restrictions suggests that the two are not unconnected in some substantial way. While Britain stands out from its European neighbours in terms of patterns of alcohol consumption and related behaviours, there is evidence of a small degree of convergence occurring between traditionally ambivalent and integrated drinking cultures. In the late 1980s and 90s, for example, there was a rapid rise in beer consumption in Spain, particularly among young males. Associated with this rise was the emergence of groups of young men engaging in typically British fashion, drinking beer by the litre, getting drunk, and engaging in antisocial behaviour. There are also similar but less extensive signs of such changes in some parts of France and Italy. In contrast, the adoption in Britain of more continental styles of drinking establishments has been viewed as a positive development. The emergence of wine bars, Mediterranean-style cafes, and a type of pub less reminiscent of the traditional male-dominated boozer has been claimed by some as heralding a shift in drinking behaviour, away from the drunken swill to a more civilised and moderate pattern of consumption. This view, however, is rarely shared by police and other agencies in town and city centres that have been transformed into large drinking circuits, and where the appearance of some bars and cafes is regarded as simply a cosmetic disguise for what are otherwise vertical drinking establishments.